quote, with just 6 other full-time members of staff and a monthly budget of only $45,000. The success of TYT has been quite remarkable. Okay, close quote. If you guys can remember the spirit of 2011, not just the details here, you might not remember how little their budget was compared to what it is today. You may remember also that in those days they openly joked about and boasted about how little effort they put into their news reporting. They would say that they just read a newspaper briefly during the commercial breaks, and then they'd comment on the particular article in the newspaper. They would openly refer to the fact that they'd maybe taken 15 minutes putting a story together by just comparing something that was in the New York Times and maybe one other source like The Guardian, and then come on camera and have a casual conversation about it. That was all they did. There were none of these sort of anguished pretensions of being a guiding light in the darkness for progressives in the United States of America that have now become the dominant tone of their news broadcasts, in part because they're trying to justify a relatively astronomical budget. I'm sure you will have noticed on screen there that before their total budget was only $45,000 a month, but today they're trying to collect $200,000 a month in donations. And that is not their only source of revenue. That's $200,000 a month in addition to the money that they're earning from YouTube itself, from Patreon, from selling t-shirts, from regular subscriptions, right? Regular subscriptions aren't part of this donation drive. We don't know how much money they're collecting per month. We don't know how much money they're spending per month. Because paradoxically, TYT is not a charity.
You know, my dad is actually not unwealthy.
Quote, my dad is actually not unwealthy.
If push came to shove, I am not going to starve. My dad's going to back me up. If push came to shove, your dad bought you an Infiniti, okay? Let alone, and that's not even coming close to shove, right? And that doesn't make you a bad person. That certainly doesn't make me a bad person, okay? But the fact is, we have backup. And a lot of people in this country don't have backup.
Cenk Uygur was in some ways a refreshing voice on the left because he transitioned from being a conservative. This is well known. He talks about it all the time. And you know, some of our prejudices are built into the English language itself. If I say to you a conservative estimate, what does that mean? If I say to you a liberal estimate, what does that mean? Built into the English language is the assumption that liberals waste money and conservatives are tight and efficient with their use of money. And Cenk Uygur, when he first came over to the left, he still kind of had that air about him. He was really boasting that whereas NBC and the mainstream news media, they wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode or hundreds of thousands of dollars per month and per project. He was going to compete with them, spending far less money. And you know what? It had a kind of conservative tone to it, that rhetoric coming from Cenk Uygur. And it's interesting to note the left-wing press got a little bit excited. They responded to this notion. You know, here was the little network that could with a puny budget. TYT was Sirius Radio's first original programming, an arrangement that, by 2006, provided this ragtag crew with an operating budget of $250,000 per year. But they decided to quit. They decided to break away from that deal. The gamble paid off. Within a year of quitting the deal with Sirius, revenue reached the $250,000 mark. With operating costs of $35,000 a month, covering 5 full-time employees and rent, TYT is a lean and modestly profitable talking machine. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we have multiple $2 million donation drives? All right, what you have on screen there is the contrast between the $2 million fundraising drive that was successful. They succeeded in getting $2 million in donations above and beyond revenue, as mentioned. And we're juxtaposing that to the announcement that they raised $20 million in venture capital funding.
Well, I mean, I just realized Ben's uncle is an Academy Award nominee. His brother is a...
Winner. He won
I'm sorry. His brother is a newscaster on 48 Hours.
Dateline.
Right?
You're 0 for 2.
Dateline.
You're getting there, though. Yeah.
0 for 3
Come on,
so far.
close enough for rock and roll.
You are,
Hi,
that's right.
Dateline. Jill's parents are Brentwood wealthy people.
He ran Paramount Studios.
Yes.
Her dad.
Okay, and Chang, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what your deal is.
My dad's an olive farm.
All right, but here's the point. You guys are the elite.
No, that's awesome.
Oh, come on. If you're not the elite, then the rest...
Isn't that interesting? This is 2006. 2006, when the Young Turks were just getting started. They may not have known it, but they were at the start of this long, long period, frankly, of dominance of left-wing media. And it was already being pointed out by their audience that really, they're all quite wealthy people. And that includes things that still come up on the show. They mention taking vacations in exotic places like Hawaii. They mention things about their lifestyle in Los Angeles. If they could ask for donations back in 2006, when they boasted they had a budget of only $35,000 or $45,000 a month total operating cost, after you've crossed that point where you have a headline in a mainstream newspaper announcing $20 million of capital investment, right? Venture capital. At what point do you stop asking for donations? At what point do you stop crying poor and recognize, I mean, certainly amongst the left-wing media, I mean, very few journalists get paid today. This is a particular line of work, whether publishing, broadcasting, or YouTube. A lot of people are doing this for no money at all or merely symbolic payment. If you want to know how much I make. And in fact, these people don't represent the common man. They don't represent the plight of the poor or the oppressed in some really strange sense from day one, from the start.
If you're not the elite, then the rest of us are pieces of garbage.
Throughout the mainstream media, and especially left of center, the Central Park 5 case is still discussed, still mentioned, still invoked, as if it were something that discredited Donald Trump. The very few of us who have investigated the facts of the case know that instead it's a turning point in history that to a horrifying extent discredits the left of center mainstream media.
When you imply they must have done something anyway, you're saying, I don't care that they didn't do it. So if you don't care they didn't do it, why? Why? If it was his kids, if it was Ivanka and Don Jr., do you think he would say, I don't care that they didn't do it? I don't care. Both sides, there's two sides to this. There's two sides to it. No, of course not. He views certain people as above the law, and it doesn't matter what they do, and they can get away with anything. Other people, they're under the law. It doesn't matter if they did it or didn't do it. We're gonna punish them based on my stereotypes of them.
There is a two-tier justice system. We do have a problem with targeting innocent people of color and putting them behind bars when they have not committed a crime. And what that does is not only ruin their lives, but it also allows the real culprit to go out there and commit more crimes, more rape, more murder, and that is certainly what happened in this case.
That is absolutely what happened in this case, and we talked about it earlier this week. That is exactly what happened in this case.
Even if you believe that someone like Donald Trump is untrustworthy, that does not make Whoopi Goldberg trustworthy. The story that Whoopi Goldberg is telling, which is simply DNA evidence doesn't lie, therefore these 5 men are completely innocent, therefore Donald Trump is wrong and evil and bad and terrible. Do you think that Whoopi Goldberg has done the little bit of reading, the 40 pages of reading that I did in preparing this video? Do you think that Whoopi Goldberg has read the Armstrong Report? I don't. I also don't believe that Donald Trump has read the Armstrong Report. Donald Trump may be wrong about many, many things. If Donald Trump is right about this, I guess it's just his dumb luck, or he asked the opinion of some lawyer in New York City who knows more than he does. It's terrifying to me that the small number of people I trust in the mainstream media, people whose opinions I care about, like DJ Vlad here, have completely jumped on the bandwagon of trying to present the Central Park 5 as heroes without doing the little bit of fact-checking that I've done in preparing this YouTube video to present to you now.
Right. Kevin, when are you going to lead the overthrow?
Yeah, we're done.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, do you not even question yourselves a little and say, my God, we have everything going for us.
Kevin.
We have everything going for us, and here we are talking about the downtrodden and how hard.
I think they are shaken up by it. Sorry, just looking at the expressions of their faces and so on. I think they were not expecting to deal with this question. Does it disqualify you to be a voice for the left if your family is fabulously wealthy? Or, is there a more nuanced conclusion to draw here?
There's an 18-year-old black woman in Madison, Wisconsin, who was set on fire by white men. She was stopped at a stoplight, and she says that as she was waiting at that stoplight in Madison, Wisconsin, they sprayed her with lighter fluid and then lit her on fire.
In preparation for recording this video, I did precisely what none of the journalists in the mainstream media did, and that is that I read the full police report from cover to cover. So I can say to you with some confidence, this is about fraud. This is about politically motivated deception on a massive scale. As I'm asking you to be very skeptical about what mainstream news broadcasters have told you about this case that unfolded at the height of public fascination with the Black Lives Matter movement, it is inevitable that you will be skeptical of what I have to say also. And so, in opening this video, just to pique your skepticism, I would like to point out that this is videotape evidence of precisely what happened when this young woman drove through the intersection where she said these extraordinary events unfolded. This is the log, moment by moment, of when her car passed through each of the intersections downtown, including the one where she described these extraordinary events happening. And this is the text message she sent to her boyfriend approximately 3 minutes after those events unfolded, when her hair and face would have still been smoldering after she had patted out the flames.
Now to an ABC News exclusive. The 18-year-old biracial woman who says she was attacked by 4 white men while she was driving. Althea Bernstein says she was set on fire, and Alex Perez joins us with the latest on the investigation. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, George. The 18-year-old says she's studying to be a paramedic, and some of those skills kicked in the horrifying moment she was attacked. This morning, police in Madison, Wisconsin are searching for the suspects responsible for this. A young biracial woman suffering 2nd and 3rd degree burns after she says she was set on fire.
She said, I was listening to some music at a stoplight, and then all of a sudden I heard someone yell the N-word really loud. I turned my head to look, and somebody's throwing lighter fluid on me, and then they threw a lighter at me, and my neck caught on fire, and I tried to put it out.
I haven't really slept, and I don't really have an appetite, so it's just, I don't want anyone to ever feel like this. I don't even remember anything, but your brain still has that flight or fight response that takes care of you. So I made it home. I called my mom. I drove myself to the ER.
Now, an active and ongoing investigation, Madison's mayor saying, while we are still learning more about the details, current information suggests this may have been a premeditated crime targeted toward people of color, which makes the incident even more disturbing.
It's definitely a learning opportunity, and I'm very, very hopeful that these men sort of see all the responses and that they know that they hurt me. And that this is something that's going to affect me for a while.
She was not terribly convincing on camera, and looking at the police report, it seems that she was not terribly convincing off camera either. Quote, Althea stated that she didn't think Nick would do anything violent to her. Althea then stated, quote, I don't remember anything, close quote. That would look great in court if this were to ever go to court. She stated that the fact that there isn't any video of the attack happening really concerns her and confuses her. And I'll bet the original audio recording of this discussion with the police she would sound very confused indeed and would further discredit herself in court. I asked her if, when she said she didn't remember anything, she meant she didn't remember anything from that night, or she didn't remember Livingston doing anything violent or harmful to her. Althea then stated, quote, "I don't remember the attack," close quote. She stated that she remembered it really well a couple days after it occurred, but that had been slowly fading from her memory since then. Althea went on to say she feels as though her brain is erasing or cutting out the memories of the attack as time goes by. Yes, quite apart from the level of scrutiny required for a police investigation or for a conviction in court, just imagine if journalists did basic fact-checking and asked questions of this kind.
So, we're doing this story live, and you just looked it up. So I have not had a chance to read the details. But presumably, if she went to the hospital and she's got burns on her neck and face, that's verifiable. And so if it turns out not to be the case, obviously we'll come back and tell you that.
We continue reading directly from the police report. Quote, "I told Althea that one of the things we had questions about was a number of steps that she had taken as she left Livingston's apartment. I explained that based both on her and Livingston's statement, she had left his apartment and walked to her car on her own. I stated that there was a large number of steps and a longer amount of time that didn't seem consistent with her just leaving his apartment and going to her car." I pause. How do the police know this? Because all of these people are carrying cell phones and are constantly messaging one another, so you know their precise location and what they're doing almost at every moment of the day. Both she and Livingston believe this car was parked right outside, so there was one little gap in the schedule that couldn't be accounted for. Whereas if you look at how many moments passed when she drove through each intersection without ever stopping at a red light, without ever having her window down and listening to music, without any of the most basic assumptions of her fabricated story having been true, there wasn't any time there when she could have been attacked or could have received the burns. But there was some time when she was with her boyfriend when something could have happened. I asked if she remembered anything else from that night that might have happened in between leaving Livingston's apartment and getting to her car. Althea answered, quote, "I don't even know," close quote. Again, that would stand up really well in court. And if you were just a journalist covering this case and you just read this, if you were a journalist, you didn't even conduct the interview, you just read this summary of the police interview, how would you report the story?
I want to share one more detail that she shared with authorities. She said two of them were wearing all black and the other two donned floral shirts and jeans. And keep in mind that lately there have been far-right protesters, agitators, essentially white supremacists who have been showing up at Black Lives Matter protests to cause problems, in some cases even attack some of the protesters.
Althea asked if we had been able to find any cameras around Livingston's apartment. So it's like, so the police are confronting you with this. Like, hey, we have a different explanation for these events concerning what happened when you were at or around your boyfriend's apartment. She's like, well, do you have videotape evidence of that? Quote, "I stated that we had not." Althea then stated, "I'm 100% confident of what happened." Oh, gee, just a few seconds ago, you said you were confused and you didn't remember and it felt like it was erased from your memory. And then you asked, do you have videotape evidence of that? Oh, okay then I'm 100% confident of what happened. Yeah. You have discredited yourself. And this is not the only evidence in this police report. I could make an hour-long video. Trust me, the problem here is not the police. The problem here is the politically motivated press and the way this is made into propaganda. Althea went on to say that she very firmly believes that what she told us in the days immediately after the attack is what happened to her. Althea added, quote, "I just don't understand why there's no evidence. I just don't understand why the videotape evidence of what actually happened at that intersection isn't the same as my lie." Most of the police report is unredacted, which is to say, uncensored, but there are some interesting erasures like this one. Anything to do with her health, anything to do with the psychiatric medications she may be taking, anything to do with what the burns actually were caused by, whether the burns on her face were caused by flame or by abrasion or by a chemical reaction. That has been omitted, and naturally people are asking questions. So, although the physical examination of the human being involved in the story has been kept from public view, the examination of the car has not been. And yes, as you can imagine, there is telling physical evidence, including chemical testing, forensic laboratories, so on and so forth, that once again discredits her ridiculous, difficult to believe story. These are not the only demonstrable lies that you can find in the report. And these other lies, although less salacious, speak to her character. She insists again and again that when she arrived at the hospital, she was wearing a blue zip-up hooded sweatshirt. Her father seemed very confused by this. The other people asked about it don't remember her owning a blue hooded sweatshirt. And in fact, at one point, her father goes to try to get the sweatshirt. He's like, oh, do you mean this one? And when they're asked about it, she makes up a further lie that this was a sweatshirt that she'd bought in London, England, and that her father didn't know about. Like, her father seems to know most of her wardrobe. She's not a fancy dresser, as you can see from this photograph. But guess what? This photograph is from the security camera showing the clothing that she was wearing when she arrived at the hospital. She was not wearing a blue hooded sweatshirt. Now, does this matter? Well, it tells you what kind of person she is, what kind of stories she tells. She evidently felt it would make her story seem more compelling or more believable if there were this sweatshirt that was soaked with lighter fluid, that stank of lighter fluid, that provided more tangible evidence that her story was true. Now, actually, if your sweatshirt were soaked with lighter fluid and a live match or a lit lighter was thrown in your car, your whole sweatshirt would have burst into flames. So it actually makes your story less believable. But she thinks this makes her story more believable. And she makes up the further lie that because this shirt stank so much of the accelerant, of this flammable material, that the hospital staff took it away from her and threw it in the garbage. But look, this surveillance footage camera doesn't lie. Many people get into the habit of lying to their parents and getting away with it at an early age. And you know what? You may be accustomed to lying to authority figures at your school who fundamentally just don't care. Like if you go into the principal's office and claim that you were sick when you weren't really sick, it's very likely the authority figures you dealt with in school fundamentally don't care about what's true or false. They've just got to get on with their schedule and deal with 40 other kids who have 40 other excuses for why their homework is late or why they couldn't write the exam or whatever it is. This seems to me somebody who has fundamentally become very comfortable with that childish habit of mind of making up stories and presuming she can get away with it.
Let me talk to you about a very simple problem with having a private for-profit company asking for donations. They have to pay back the loan to these venture capital funding firms with interest at a profit. So when they ask you to donate money, it's quite possible that 100% of your donations will go to the profit of these investors. If the Walt Disney Company asked you now for donations to help the company do well during a difficult time, this sort of thing, many people would donate money. They would rather donate money to Walt Disney than donate to the Christian church, right? They get a lot more entertainment value out of Disney than out of some, moth-eaten, religion from 2,000 years ago, okay? There are people who would do it, but it would be the role of responsible, sober minds like ourselves say, wait. Think about where that money is going. Walt Disney has investors. Walt Disney has to pay dividends. If you donate money to Walt Disney, you are donating to profit somebody else who is an owner or an investor. Right? This is a very fundamental problem with having a private for-profit company collecting donations. So you can imagine, what if the Young Turks is trying to prove to these venture capitalists that they can be profitable when they're $20 million in debt to them, when they've accepted $20 million in funding and in loans, however you want to put this. Well, if they can turn around and raise $2 million anytime they ask for it, that's one hell of a business model. The problem is, it's not business.
Thank you to the viewers who have sent it to me. We will look into it a little deeper and give you updates as we get them.
It's easy to preach freedom of speech, and it's much more difficult to deal with problems of accountability. You might or might not have noticed the extent to which the reporters at TYT, the Young Turks, couched their words, stating that they would follow up on this later after they'd investigated it more deeply because they weren't really entirely confident that this story checked out. Yeah, go ahead, search their YouTube channel, search all their websites, find any evidence of a retraction. Find me a video where they delivered the same hard-hitting message that I'm delivering to you here and now, that this was fraud, that this was a hoax, that this was massively influential political propaganda that reached an audience of millions of people, and that frankly radicalized people at a time when there were really important political questions to be asking, simultaneous with this surreal, made-up, imaginary neo-Nazi attack on the streets of Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin decided to demonstrate how woke they are by tearing down a statue of a white man without pausing to look up in Wikipedia who that white man was or why there was a statue to him. And guess what? He was anti-slavery. He died fighting to liberate the slaves. He was somebody who was on the right side of history, but nevertheless, Black Lives Matter protesters tore down his statue just because he was white. In the year 2020, mistakes were made, and there were important lessons to be learned from those mistakes. The Young Turks are going to only prevent you from learning them. ABC News, tragically, is going to prevent you from learning them, because none of these mainstream news sources did that most simple, essential thing that I did. None of them read the police report. Cenk, you said just a few months ago that TYT is doing great, and now a few days ago you're crying about how TYT needs money and people need to give their money to TYT. What? Some people, just a few, they've started to lose patience with the constant e-begging, the crying poor. TYT, this is from a journalist quoted at the bottom left of the screen, TYT raised $2 million from individual donations last year. Now, of course, in reality, it was more than that, right? That was just one campaign. That was one drive to get donations, but there was one with a $2 million target. It raised $2 million last year to hire a bunch of journalists that left within a few months after promising to create a substantive network for reporting that still doesn't exist there. We need more reporting, less punishment. So this is a very interesting story to look into, is what happened after their last $2 million fundraising drive was a big success. If you've just been listening to TYT on and off for 3 or 5 years, you'll know there was no change in quality. There was no improvement in what they're, producing. There was no visible increase in the number of staff participating. And one by one, each of the journalists who were very briefly added to their list of personalities on camera quit or were fired, sometimes with a scandal, sometimes without. But it's very, very hard to see any trace of where those $2 million supposedly went. Here's a promise for you. Donate $1 and TYT gets 2. Donate $10 and TYT gets 20. Donate 50 and TYT gets 100. Yes, well, they're suggesting that if you donate with this double strong campaign, they'll end up with twice as much money as they're promising. Here's a real sensitive note from the e-beggars. We understand that these are precarious financial times for many, but if you can afford to contribute, any amount will serve to ensure TYT's long-term financial stability. Why can't they go back to operating on $45,000 a month?
What is it that happened? What is it that went wrong in the midst of all this success that they used to be profitable and stable at $45,000 a month total costs, and now they can't even stay in business with $200,000 a month in donations, plus all their other revenue streams? Well, it's an interesting case where I think they were cursed by success rather than failure. Quote, the Young Turks have had success with crowdfunding in the past. In 2013, the Young Turks hosted an Indiegogo campaign to raise money for a new studio space. With an initial goal of $250,000, the network ultimately raised more than $400,000 to build a state-of-the-art studio and newsroom in Culver City, California. That is a suburb of Los Angeles. I think I see the problem here. I say with all due sympathy that maybe one of the unforeseen consequences of this success was that they relocated into a studio and into an expensive part of Los Angeles to survive in, where they had permanently increased their costs in a way that was unsustainable. The outcomes of the TYT climate change fundraiser are again very, very difficult to pin down. That was $200,000 supposedly donated for a town hall event and a debate that never happened. They ended up vaguely promising that instead, because they wouldn't actually hold this debate, they would hire a new full-time climate change reporter. As with all their other promises of having new staff, more and better content, if you've just been watching the show on and off from time to time, it's very, very difficult to see any trace of where this $200,000 went. And hey, currently they're saying they need $200,000 a month just to stay afloat. So it seems reasonable to suppose that rather than really paying for new employees, new programs, new initiative, or new events that didn't happen, this money is just disappearing into an organization that ended up treading water at much, much too high an operating cost. It's very, very difficult to keep any of these budgets straight, to keep any of these fundraisers straight. They're doing it now again and again and again. And along with the shift from being prideful about how low their budget was, how efficient they were, to this notion of themselves being a multi-million-dollar organization, we get this over-the-top rhetoric about how they're the guiding light in the darkness for the progressive movement. You must donate money because somehow the fate of the United States lies in their hand, or only they can criticize Donald Trump, so on and so forth. Now, another aspect of this story that's very close to my heart, and you can find the embarrassing details in this case on opensecrets.org, because we are talking about a non-profit, unlike the Young Turks, was the creation, the rise, and the fall of Wolfpack. So if you haven't heard of Wolfpack, Wolfpack was really the political wing of what the Young Turks was all about. PAC is Political Action Committee. It's a type of registered political charity in the United States. And because of the support of Cenk Uygur himself, of the Young Turks, they now have an enormous annual budget. Salaries, $434,000 per year, just on salaries for Wolfpack. This is entirely paid for by donations. I don't think Wolfpack is making any significant amount of money out of selling t-shirts and hats, whereas TYT does. And when you look at the list of what it is they do, there are a lot of conspiracy theories about this, but long story short, they are expected to, as a PAC, as this type of registered charity, spend most of their money on contributions to committees, contributions to state and local candidates. And instead, there are just a few crumbs out of the budget for that, right? $5,500 for one line, $3,100 for the other, okay? And instead, strangely, over $400,000 going into salaries, wages and benefits, travel and lodging, accountants, even $70,000 for unclassifiable printing and shipping. Yeah, and of course the cost of fundraising itself. So we have a recurring pattern here. I think that part of what made Cenk Uygur an interesting and dynamic figure on the left when he first came into the scene was precisely that he had made the transition from the right. He had been a conservative. And the overall mood and spirit of what the Young Turks were trying to do 10 years ago, I think it actually did reflect that kind of latent conservative attitude Cenk had. If I say to you a conservative estimate, what do I mean? If I say to you a liberal budget,
What do I mean? Do I say liberal allowances for something? I was fascinated to find just today that in the Chinese language, they actually have the same prejudice. The word that's used to mean politically conservative in Chinese also means that you're tight with your money. So that was an aspect of who Cenk was, and it was an aspect of what TYT was supposed to be that was actually celebrated. It was celebrated by them. They were proud of it. And it was celebrated, as I've just shown you, in newspaper articles being written about them. And I think that made people feel confident to donate a little bit of money, knowing that they only needed a little bit of money. And what happened over the years, over approximately 10 years, was that they got used to, they got reliant on a very liberal budget indeed. I care about this issue sincerely, and I think it really matters, not just short term, but long term. I said to my mother a couple of weeks ago that in the past, anyone could have said to you that the Walt Disney Corporation would soon fall apart, break up, or be facing lots of competition of the same kind. 50 years ago, someone could have said speculatively, there's nothing special about the Walt Disney Corporation. They've got a cartoon mouse, but anyone can draw another cartoon mouse. They've got a theme park. Anyone can set up a new theme park. Really, in the future, the Walt Disney Company is just going to be one small company among many, all competing as equals. But that's not what's happened at all, right? In fact, the cultural and even political dominance of the Disney Corporation is now difficult to fathom. It's easy to have a sort of dismissive attitude towards this, as if anyone can buy a laptop, a video camera, and start competing with the Young Turks. It would be just as ridiculous to say that anyone can buy a web development kit and set up the next Facebook, and that Facebook's going to lose its market share and fall apart, that anyone can set up a company like Amazon.com. By and large, what happens with the internet is that whoever manages to occupy a given space first, whoever manages to cater to a given market need first, builds unbelievable power, privilege, and influence on that basis just because they are the company or they are the website that got there first. Does it always work that way? No. Facebook managed to do better than MySpace. However, today, for you to start a new company and do even as well as MySpace, let alone Facebook, is impossible because that market is already crowded. So TYT, from my perspective, they're in an incredibly influential position and they're likely to remain there. But in this pejorative sense of the word liberal, the liberal tendency has eroded one of the most fundamental characteristics that made TYT what it was. Once in a while, I get an email asking me what this logo is. What do those 4 letters stand for? Active research and informed opinion. That's the motto.
Good, guys, because I come in here every single day covered in glitter, covered in sequins, covered in booty shorts, covered in nylons, so that I do not violate the terms of service, so that each and every one of you can have both hands on the keyboard, so that you can enjoy the stream, so that you can have a good time listening to me, playing with me, singing with me, smiling with me, enjoying your life, which you do deserve to enjoy. Each and every moment of your life you enjoy, and each and every moment of your life is worthy. You guys, you can do it. You can be the best that you can be, and we can do it together. It's going to take effort. It's going to take patience. It's going to take a lot of work. But if we don't try, then what the fuck is stopping us from just throwing ourselves off a bridge and giving up and saying, yeah, the planet is dying. The government hates us. The animals are leaving. The aliens aren't contacting us. We might be alone. It just might be you and me. But that's okay, because do you really need anyone else?